The board hosts a virtual town hall to present the 2023-2024 budget. The acting treasurer, Jerry Kafka, opens the town hall by admonishing a number of members for questioning and being critical of a line item that deals with drainage ditch work. Kafka's opening remarks kick off 2 hours of hostilities. Paul Bradley warns the community that should the 2023-2024 assessment be voted down, the board will move forward with the 2022-2023 budget that the community approved 1 year ago. And in that budget, it includes a $120,000 line item for drainage ditch work. Bradley, Thomas, and Kafka lead an effort to develop a property at 31 Bridge Road as a combination guard shack, meeting facility, and detention center. My name is Greg Pickler with the MXB Wire, reporting on location at the Bethesda studio, and you're watching my update for Friday, March 24, 2023, only 1 week late. Hello, my friends. Jerry Kafka, the acting treasurer of the Middlesex Beach Association, presented the budget for the fiscal year 2023/2024 at the virtual town hall meeting held on Thursday, March 16, 2023. However, prior to presenting the budget, Kafka stated that he was troubled to discover what he characterized as a small group of property owners who have been in conversation on social media and through email about one line item that involves the development of drainage ditches. Kafka stated that it was inappropriate for the group of renegade property owners to circumvent what he called the process by which associations' budgets get approved. Kafka stated that in his mind, the group of renegade property owners clearly arrived at their opinion under a, quote, misunderstanding and didn't have all the facts. In fact, a group of 18 property owners did circulate an email chain to discuss the proposition of spending an additional $120,000 on a drainage ditch project on yet a third road in the community. When you combine the line item proposition with the drainage ditch project on another road, the funds to which already have been allocated as part of a previous budget to address the drainage ditches on another road, the total expenditure would amount to $1,000 per property or thereabouts over a 2-year period. I was briefly included on that email chain until the group thought the better of it. Kate Montier pleaded with me to not exercise my First Amendment speech rights and publish an article about the performance and voting record of the incumbent board members in the weeks leading up to the next board election. Effectively a repeat of the article Voter Compass, which I published on August 22nd, 2020. On the event that I did not make such assurances to Kate, the renegade group of property owners promptly removed me from the email chain. Kafka further stated that the group of renegade property owners did not follow the process established by Delaware statute and circumvented that process when arriving at and distributing an opinion contrary to the presentation of the assessment by the board prior to the community meeting now scheduled for Saturday, May 6, 2023. Kafka stated that the rationale for the process is to give all the members equal access to the information for which the budget is to be approved. In Kafka's words, quote, "For the board to do otherwise would violate the board's legal obligation," end quote. Kafka neglected to identify what the process he spoke of was or the statute for which the process is set down. Kafka urged the renegade property owners to read and to consider an article Paul Bradley provided a link to in his broadcast email message dated March 13, 2023. The article that Bradley recommended the community of property owners read is entitled "Driving Your Association into the Ditch." In following the thrust of the article, Kafka stated that the board must look out for the interests of the community for both the community's current needs as well as the community's future needs. I must admit, I did not read through the Delaware statute. Presumably, Kafka means the Delaware Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act, or named DECOYA, that Kafka references in his opening dialogue, nor the article that Bradley refers to prior to sending out my broadcast email message dated February 23, 2023. The broadcast email message dated February 23, 2023, reports that a number of former board members and other visible property owners question the cost-effectiveness of past drainage ditch work and question whether more money should be spent on such projects at this time. I am puzzled what effect DECOYA has on any discussion about the appropriateness of allocating funds to a drainage ditch project in advance of a community meeting now scheduled for May 6, 2023. The freedom of information, the freedom of speech, and the First Amendment speech rights is the mechanism by which democratic institutions arrive at public policy in general. Kafka further stated that the 2023-2024 board did not cause the problem for which the $120,000 line item is set down to address. Rather, Kafka intimated that previous boards neglected to properly maintain the assets of the community, which compel the community to address the drainage issues now and not simply kick the can down the road, as it were. Specifically, Kafka cites a failure on the part of the 2016-2017 board to properly identify cost towards remediating a drainage matter that fell out of a prior study as the primary reason for the need for the current line item at issue. Board President Paul Bradley weighed in to mention that members of the association were actively in communication with Sussex County surrounding the challenges posed by the drainage ditches. Bradley stated that the 2022-2023 board approved the drainage ditch work on Bayberry Road to signal to the Delaware Department of Transportation and Denarec that the association takes water management seriously and to influence the two authority bodies into advancing the drainage ditch work along Kent Avenue. Bradley further stated that this was the primary rationale that the 2021-2022 board allocated the funds to address the drainage ditches on Bayberry Road in the 2022-2023 assessment. Apparently, these funds have been spent. Bradley further stated that the expert opinion from a man he trusts, a man he identifies as Linden, is in favor of extending the drainage ditch work that has been performed on Bridge Road and Bayberry Road. Across the other east-west roads, Errett, Addy, and finally Evergreen. Bradley reported that DelDOT has committed to cleaning out the culverts therein. However, neither DelDOT nor Denerac have agreed to advance the drainage ditch problems along Kent Avenue to any significant extent. Bradley warned that the members on the conference call that if the membership votes down the assessment, the board will revert and move forward with the 2022-2023 budget, which the community approved last year. The 2022-2023 assessment includes $120,000 for drainage ditch improvements. Do you ever wonder why you never hear a dissenting opinion at these community meetings? This was a contentious issue around the board table. 4 of the board members voted down this budget, but who do you hear from? You hear from the proponents. You hear from Bradley, Kafka, Thomas, Margie Sear. Well, Margie Sear lives at 25 Addy, so she would certainly be affected by any drainage issues. I believe Ron Thomas is on Short, and he's west of Jeff Sella, so you would think reasonably he would be affected with drainage issues. It just strikes me that the 4 other board members who voted down this budget didn't speak up at all. Bradley then turned the floor over to the community for comment. Jeff Sella was the first to weigh in. Sella attempted to dispel the belief that a copy of the budget was leaked, presumably by a current member of the board. Sella stated he personally gleaned the figure from listening to a discussion by the members of the board about a line item costing $125,000 over the course of the board meeting on February 18th, 2023. Sella further stated that the community is looking at upwards of $250,000 to $500,000 of drainage ditch work when the work across the entire community is complete. Sella further stated that the money that was allocated and spent on the drainage ditch work on Bridge Road was done as a controlled, quote, experiment or test to see whether the project had an effect of moving water out of the community properly. Sella further stated that over the course of the board meeting on February 18th, 2023, no one could state equivocally that the project on Bridge Road had the desired effect. The project certainly moved money out of the community. Sella further stated that water naturally moves from the highest point in the community at 26 Short Road to the lowest point, that being the southwest portion of the community. Sella maintains that the best the community can hope for is that water on his yard, Jonas's yard, and Stoiber's yard will move to form a pond on points to the southwest. Sella stated that David Weeking spent enormous amount of his personal time and energy into remediating the drainage issues throughout his tenure as facilities chair. Sella further pointed out that there appears to be a rush to get the drainage ditch work complete throughout the community in the absence of any assurances that this approach indeed works. Margie Sear then weighed in, stating that she had been meeting with representatives of Denerac for 2 years. Sear stated that she included Bradley in her conversation with Denerac 1 year ago. Sear further stated that Denerac referred to the community to a point person within DelDOT to work with. Sear further stated that the project to date has been successful and needs to continue. How did Denarek arrive at the conclusion that the drainage ditch work on Bridge Road was effective? Did anyone question that? No one else seems to be aware of this accomplishment. Is it possible that Denarek comes to the opinion that the drainage ditch work is successful because Margie Sear is telling them that? Margie Sear thinks the project's successful. Is that where they're getting their information from? Should we trust Denarek's opinion based on the fact they're only talking with Margie Sear and perhaps Paul Bradley? To go on, Sear stated that Bradley is also currently in conversation with Sussex County Conservation District. Sear advanced Bradley's point that the community's persistence in addressing the drainage work signals the Delaware Department of Transportation, DelDOT, and Denarek that the association takes water management seriously. Sear cites the relationship as positive. Why are we spending all this money to impress DelDOT and Denarek if they're not moving to remediate drainage issues on Kent Avenue? I mean, we have a total of 15 residents that are Delaware residents. We have a total of 15 houses where permanent residents are living in those houses. So how much motivation does DelDOT or Denarek have to remediate anything? Or how impressive is that to a state senator who's representing District 38? You know, they don't care about a bunch of people that are out of state. They're not getting anything more from us than property taxes, and those are going municipally in the local region for schools largely. Sear further states that the contractor has been in communication with, here we go, State Representative Ronald Gray about the ditches in the community as well as those along Kent Avenue. Gray is the representative for Delaware District 38. Community Vice President Ron Thomas weighed in, stating that the drainage ditch work to date has been a success. Thomas stated that there has been an observable improvement to the ditches along Bayberry Road. Thomas stated that the measurement of success is whether you observe water in the ditches and not standing water on the various properties. Well, there you go. Thomas further stated that the winter season is the season you would otherwise see issues with standing water. Thomas explicitly stated that the water is clearly being retained in the ditches, while at the same time, he did not observe standing water on the property along Bayberry Road this past winter season. Thomas took great exception to Sella's characterization that the drainage ditch project on Bridge Road was a, quote, experiment. Thomas explicitly stated that he never used the word experiment to describe the drainage ditch project on Bridge Road. In support of Thomas's observations, Sear stated that she observed water from the ditches within the community flowing into the ditches along Kent Avenue. Did she observe that one day? Did she observe that for a whole week? Is that going on for years? You know, these are questions that need to get answered. Community member David Taylor weighed in, cautioning the board not to accept the presence of water in the ditches as a measurement of success. Bravo. Taylor advocated that the community should wait until the ditches along Kent Avenue are addressed prior to pursuing more drainage ditch work in the community. Bravo. Taylor further advocated that once the ditches along Kent Avenue are sufficiently low enough to draw water from the community, then the community should proceed with the drainage ditch work. Former board member Jim Dempsey weighed in, following Taylor's cautionary comments on objective measurements of success. Dempsey advocated that the objective measure of success is seeing the ditches absent of any water. Dempsey advocated that the community should allocate the money that the board has earmarked for the drainage ditch project in the 2023-2024 assessment towards capital reserves. Dempsey presumably advocated that the board refrain from further drainage ditch work. Community member Chris Powers weighed in, refuting much of what Ron Thomas had to say regarding the success of the drainage ditch project along Bridge Road. Powers, who owns a property at 3 Bridge Road, reported that the property has standing water year-round. Powers further reported that in her discussions with the contractor informed her that the culverts would need to be blown out on a yearly basis. This expense does not seem to appear on the assessment and is yet another hidden cost of effective water management. Community member Kate Montier weighed in, cautioning the community to regard Denarec as an expert in drainage ditches. Exactly. Because all they're doing is getting their information from Margie Sear. It certainly appears. Community member Joe Woolman weighed in, stating that he lifted the characterization of the drainage ditch project as a, quote, test from the minutes of the special board meeting held on January 31st, 2023, and that the wording is not his own, but rather the wording is that of the board. As Paul Bradley cut Woolman off after his 2-minute time allotment, Woolman demanded that the board define an objective criteria to define success. Woolman also demanded the board commission a drainage committee to study the issue. Doesn't sound like such a bad idea. Former board member Jeff Sella spoke a second time, admitting he does not have a water issue on his property at 25 Short Road. Sella questioned why the board is following an all-or-nothing approach to drainage ditches, further justifying the need for a committee. Former board member Dave Weeking weighed in, advocating for the installation of meters to measure water levels in the community. What a novel idea! Actually know what the water level is. Weeking also advocated for proctoring a survey to learn the wishes of the community regarding the contentious topic. Weeking also advocated for raising the roads, as South Bethany is in the process of doing. The work put in to these community budgets and assessments is not trivial, and those that draft these budgets should be commended for their work. Having said that, both Kafka and Bradley correctly point out that drainage ditches have been a topic of discussion in formulating these budgets for the past 2 decades. Further, both Kafka and Bradley have correctly pointed out that the drainage has been a topic of discussion historically. However, both Kafka and Bradley understate the historical fact that the community has never realized a spring thaw absent of standing water. Again, David Weeking spent enormous amounts of his personal time and energy into remediating the drainage issues throughout his tenure as facilities chair. Much of Weeking's effort have had little effect on the underlying problem, that being the inescapable fact that the area west of US Route 1 is only an average of 5 feet above sea level. A small number of property owners have raised the ground on their property half foot or a full foot. However, the cost of elevating the sea level of the area west of Route 1, ergo adding millions of metric tons of sand, is well beyond the financial means of the community. In fact, the community west of US Route 1 has always been observed to be a swamp, dating back to 1959 when the development was incorporated. I can personally attest to the fact that as a young child, I recall standing water in the community west of US Route 1. I was born in 1960. My family has owned the property at 20 Dune Road since that time, and my family built the property on 20 Dune Road in 1961, predating the 1962 nor'easter storm. I do not think anyone who spearheaded the budget cycle, this cycle of the budget, or who is in conversations with representatives of DelDOT, DENEREC, the state, or the county can make that claim. The other important point that Kafka understates is that little progress, if any, has been made to the ditches following Kent Avenue. There is currently nowhere for excess water to migrate during the spring thaw. The spring thaw typically begins in mid-February. This problem has never been properly addressed by DelDOT, by DENEREC, nor the state of Delaware, nor the county. Further, there is no plan to address this inescapable fact on the horizon. Without cooperation from the state, any comprehensive plans will do little more than redistribute water to various properties. Sometimes you need to trust your gut instinct in lieu of expert opinion. And this is one of those times. Save major changes to the drainage ditches on Kent Avenue to provide a channel whereby water can flow to the Assawamma Bay. I do not trust the experts. I would also discount the opinions of a contractor who performed the work on Bridge Road and Bayberry Road, given the obvious conflict of interest. For that same reason, I would also discount the influence the contractor has with State Representative Gray. And for similar reasons, I would not trust the opinions of DENEREC, as they seem to be reflective and mirroring or parroting the opinions of just a small number of board members who are committed to the project. Since acquiring the family property at 20 Dune Road in 2002, I have voted to affirm all of the assessments put forward by the board. This year, save a modification to the assessment, either excising the one line item tied to drainage ditches, or one that follows Jim Dempsey's suggestion to divert the monies to the capital reserve. I will be voting no. Not that a downvote will have any material impact. None of the modifications will be forthcoming. Bradley stated as such. Bradley reported that the board has voted for the one budget and the board will not consider any other assessment, as the DeCoya process would require the board to effectively start over, and they're not going to do that. Still, if the 2023-2024 assessment is voted down, it will send a message to this existing board. My friends, there is one more news item I would like to share with you. Paul Bradley, Ron Thomas, and Jerry Kafka reportedly led an effort to acquire the property at 31 Bridge Road and develop the property into a combination guardhouse, meeting facility, and detention center. In addition to Bradley, Thomas, and Kafka, up to 15 other community members reportedly considered jointly acquiring the property at 31 Bridge Road. The listing price for the property was $1.4 million. In fact, a number of community members who were in on the negotiations pledged up to $100,000 towards the acquisition. Ultimately, the group headed by Bradley, Thomas, and Kafka failed to effect the acquisition. The property sold on March 10, 2023 for $1.2 million. Here's the advertisement of the property on Realtor.com. Had the acquisition gone through, the group had plans to name the facility the BTK Combination Guardhouse, Meeting Facility, and Detention Center. In fact, we have the professional illustration done by a Delaware firm. I tell you, the people in Delaware are every bit as good as the professionals in the GTA area. The group reportedly had plans to lease a portion of the property to the association where the group had plans to erect a separate guardhouse. The group reportedly had plans to lease the space to the association for $240,000 per year, which works out to $1,000 per residential property owner. Had the acquisition gone through, the group also had plans to lease the meeting facilities of the property to the association in exchange for $5,000 per meeting. The investment would have easily broken even in 12 years. It just occurred to me, the name of the facility is exactly the same acronym as a serial killer in the state of Kansas. However, due to Decoya protocol, it's just too late to change it now. Moving on, in the case of the detention center, the group had plans to incarcerate a number of community members who have repeatedly violated association rules. Joe Raskowskis was to be inmate bearing the number M001. Raskowskis had flagrantly and deliberately recorded one of the board meetings in the spring of 2019 in violation of a board motion. Apparently, recording a conversation is not against any laws in Delaware, provided you are a party to the conversation. However, it is a violation of the current board protocol. That is for sure. The group also had plans to name me as inmate number M002 for not only illicitly recording a community meeting, but also for publishing the candidate speeches on the MXB wire, which is also apparently a grave violation. Oh my God, I didn't know he was a fascist and a member of the KKK.